that we have not fully considered our approach to these subjects in light of how Jesus handled the relevant questions of his day? Should we not at least consider the possibility that our approach is influenced more by the world's norms and ethics than by Jesus? Is it possible that what Jesus said then could still have a powerful impact upon today's politics in precisely the place where ethics meets public policy? I think so. We must, as professing followers of Jesus, keep in mind that all laws, regulations, and ordinances are enforced by the legalized use of coercion. Consider what Jesus said to believers who are in a country occupied by a foreign superpower. Observe those who bring about harmonious relationships between opposing people. They are assuredly fortunate with the good life, for they shall be called sons and daughters of God. The good life, the kind of blessed life, the flourishing life that everybody desires to have. Jesus said it is for the peacemakers, not the Machiavellian power colluders who are playing for all the right angles, scheming for all the advantages and securing whatever they can for themselves. No, not them, not the moral legalist either, who are so diligent to keep themselves untarnished by the messiness of life. No, not them, not the isolationist who retreats far away from conflict, nor the armed revolutionary so confident in their just cause. No, to Jesus, the good life, the blessed life, that life which flourishes belong to those who step into the messiness of all of this and attempt to bring about some harmony from the conflict. Those folks, the risk takers, they are living the good life. Will they be successful in their attempts for peace? Perhaps. That doesn't diminish their flourishing, because the flourishing is in the doing, not necessarily in the successful outcome. Those in conflict may have reasons to keep the conflict alive. Consider the foreign military officer, that Roman commander, and the local revolutionary fighter, the Jewish zealot. One or both of them may have seemingly rational reasons for not wanting peace. Nevertheless, a peacemaker will try to bring these two opposing sides together in some kind of harmonious relationship. This is no trivial matter. And even if those two directly involved truly appreciate the peacemaker, many others within the wider sphere of political influence may not be so pleased. Okay, so you ask, what's the point? Everyone has reasons to justify their strong opinions of opposition against one another. The Roman commander versus the Jewish zealot, the Democrat versus the Republican, rights to ancestral lands, appropriateness of education curriculum, and the list could go on and always will. Why? Because divisiveness is easy. Staying out of it is easy. Apathy is easy too, but peacemaking is not. It wasn't then, it certainly isn't now. But just as it did then, it does now lead to the good life. And don't you and I, as followers of Jesus, want as much of the good life as we can get? Don't we want our life and the lives of our family to flourish? I think so. Although that probably means we need to reconsider how our biblical worldview and ethos shape our approach to the relevant and often contentious subjects of today, but also how to engage those entrenched in political opposition, which often includes ourselves. Just think about it. We will discuss these topics and more here on the Just a Thinker podcast and at justathinker.com. Please subscribe now, like this episode, make a comment on social media about it, and share it with friends, because this family of three living in exile, we appreciate your support.
Welcome back to Revving Up with David Ross. I'm your host, David, and glad to be back with you again. There's a week delay in my release cycle with this one, but it is for a good reason, because I actually have somebody in studio with me today. I've got a repeat guest. Wow, I've been around long enough to have repeat guests. I don't know what to think about that. So anyway, we're going to be having a great conversation once again today with Brian Butka, who has been on the show before, and I've been kind of I guess we call it simulcast, whatever, that we did together here. It's been a while. It's been a minute, brother. So it's good to have you back with us. So welcome back, Brian.
Thanks. I appreciate getting to pass the test to come back again.
Right now, that bar is remarkably low. So.
That way you can make all the mistakes early.
Yeah, we'll get that done. Yeah, making sure. Yeah, I am recording. Okay. Having to do the whole coordination and multiple cameras and all that great stuff like that. That was something I have not had to do here in a while. So anyway, last time you were on, you had just started this foray into, it wasn't really the topic I forget the exact topic we talked about, but you had just started doing prison ministry. And I remember you got very I could tell you were moved, because there towards the end you were talking about there, but for the grace of God, that could have been me. And it has gotten a hold of you. I talked to Steve Miller that runs it out of your church, and caught him at a minister's breakfast here a month or so back. And he said, man, he's volunteering, he's recruiting. He said he is all in. So I wanted to have you back, and I wanted to talk about that. It seems to have become a passion with you, and I can see the transformation that it's making in your life, and I honor you for that. To lean into something when it resonated. And so talk to us about prison ministry, and why, what is it about it? I mean, what is it about it that has become so compelling to you, and what can we as the body and as fellow believers take from what you're doing?
Probably most ministers that talk about prison ministry, and pastors who encourage the congregation, Brother Shaw has, and would say, when you go to prison ministry, it'll change your life. And it's one of those where you hear that, it doesn't, you're like, because you're going to get stabbed and you're going to have that limp or whatever Paul had, the thorn in the thorn in your side. Is it because something traumatic is going to happen? Something transformational will happen, but usually not assault, right? But that fear is usually what keeps us from going. But that it is transformational. And I think that's why focusing on, today we would call them the marginalized, homeless, hungry, incarcerated. Mm-hmm. And Jesus was very passionate about that. And so much so that it seems that he, says that when you do it to the least of these, you've done it to me. And it was just talking about the basics of feeding, clothing, and visiting, right? Now, you mentioned, Steve Miller, and Reaching Out in Love is the name of the prison ministry. And they're generally bringing the gospel. But Jesus said, you're visiting me, right? In that engagement. And what's interesting is that it really is transformational. I had really no idea what it would be like. You see pictures, on social media, someone talks about it. And it is transformational in that you're going into a place where no one wants to be. Now, they generally have earned their position there in a sense. They've done something that's got them locked up, and they don't want to be on the campus, right? But you get with these men who, and there's women's prisons, you get with these men who you'll see them really make a change. God's moving in their life, and they're so grateful for people from the outside. Okay. And just, you go with an intent to help in some way, right? I'm not a preacher, not a pastor. I'm just a guy. Just whatever you would think of as this, my calling is not to lead a congregation, right? So you go just to assist whoever's leading, and you find these men who you watch their lives. They'll come up and ask for prayer, and they'll tell you what they're praying for. And you walk away just impacted by so many things, from their humility, or seeing the change, or seeing their humanity. So what kind of things do they ask to pray for? Are they profound? Are they deep? Are they trivial? Or are they all? We'll do prayer requests sometimes, like in a card.
Yeah.
On occasion, they will be silly.
Right.
Probably like if you pass those cards out with a bunch of the youth and there's some teenage boys writing something goofy, but 99% of the time, they're very serious. I've had a wide range of men come up and ask for prayer, from some very confessional. Brother Ross, one of the guys came up one time. It's like, hey, will you pray for me because my language is slipping? But so transparent. Imagine, I've never went to the altar and said, hey, you walk up or someone say, hey, can you pray for me? I'm being a terrible husband. Yeah. I'm not talking to my wife, right? But this guy was like, yeah, I stubbed my toe and I'm using profane. I really want to be better. I was like, how transparent. Imagine if we start going to our altar and someone comes up to pray, we're like, hey, pray for this. And so something that was sincere, but we might think that's small, all the way to, and that's something any of us can understand, right? Want to work on our language, to things that I can't fully comprehend. Like a man came up and said, hey, pray for my wife. She's struggling with drug addiction. He said, I'm not worried about our son because he's with family, but I'm in here.
he couldn't even go help her because he's locked up. He goes, I'm really worried because she struggles with things like Xanax and these antidepressants. He goes, but I'm so worried that she's going to pick something up off the street and it's going to have fentanyl in it. She's going to die. He was worried that she's using the drugs anyways to medicate, but was sincerely concerned, like, yeah, she could die. Because he goes, she just got out of rehab. She's still struggling. I'm locked up. And so we prayed and been checking in with this guy, but that's a real deep need.
And the mentality of, and of course you're dealing with men, that sense of responsibility and duty that is innate in men. It is being washed out by our society, unfortunately, but it's still there. And so my duty is to provide and protect my family. And because of choices I've made, I cannot do that anymore. So that feeling of helplessness has to weigh on that guy.
Yeah, so much. And because if one of our family, if our spouse was struggling, or a son or a daughter or a family member, we could at least, you could go physically to them, right? He cannot.
Right.
And so there's this level of need, potential desperation. We can think, well, we're in the West, we have most of our needs met. Well, here's someone who cannot physically go do the things that you and I might naturally, might be part of the prescription, so to speak, right? Because someone who's struggling, we need to physically be there.
Yeah.
And so you have all of those to, prayer requests for marriage, parole coming up, things of that nature. But yeah, they're generally quite deep. And you will see men who you can see the Lord. I've tried to go to places that are as close, relatively speaking, to home as possible. So I can build a relationship, and I'll watch the Lord, these men's discipleship grow. And like any congregation, we'll go to San Saba tonight. The San Saba unit is in San Saba, Texas. Reaching Out in Love is there on the first and third Saturdays of each month. And so I've been going pretty consistent for a little more than a year.
Okay.
And so I've watched men in their conversion experience and grow in the Lord. One guy in particular, big guy, met him a couple weeks after he got baptized, and it was new. And he was, he'd said, hey, this is my name, and I'm in a gang. I used to be in a gang like this. He was processing his new life. Right. And then saw him, the next service, and asked him how he's doing. He's like, great. And like, how are you really doing? He's like, well, I'm struggling because he goes, and this was a big guy, even the little bit of fat he had it was hard. Like, he's just, a guy that can handle business, right? And with some humility, he goes, well, I didn't say this last time. He goes, but I'm kind of important. And he goes, but at lunch, the guys would come up to me at lunch and want me to solve their problem. He goes, but I don't do that anymore.
Right.
And he was struggling because he's so new in his conversion. And it's reasonable to think, is this prison conversion or is this legit? And he was so frustrated because the guards didn't believe. He was like, I slammed my Bible. I don't know if I said a bunch of profanity or whatever. I was like, look, the Christian walk is hard.
Oh, yeah.
Like, at first I'll pray for you. And I sort of do that thing, like, I'll pray for you later. I'm like, nope, let's pray. Let's pray now. Let's not make this just cliche. And we prayed, and, I encouraged him in the sense of, hey, when you continue walking out your faith, and you'll make mistakes, just get back up. I said, but as you walk out your faith, you'll be a testimony not only to your fellow inmates, but to the guard.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right? It can be so powerful. And it wasn't long after that, we had a baptismal service, and actually one of the guards came in on their day off to be baptized with the inmates.
Wow.
And so you'll watch that. And I've watched this particular guy grow in his faith. There's a field chaplain who's an inmate, and JJ is his name. He has a real heart for discipleship. And I've watched this other inmate, and JJ's discipled many of these guys, or they're, part of a group, and watching them grow in their faith. So it's probably like, in that sense, any congregation where, whether you are a leader or you're the pastor, and you're watching closely, you're watching people's faith grow, their discipleship grow. And probably like any congregation, there's going to be people who really don't participate or just kind of there because they have to be, so to speak. But it's been truly a unique experience to watch God work in that place.
Well, I'm thinking of I forget the name of the missionary that went to somewhere near in Hawaii, that area of the world, some of the island nations, and I think it was leprosy or something was affecting him, and he chose to go and stay with them, knowing he would probably eventually contracted the disease, but he was so passionate about doing what Jesus said. This is my calling. I am called to these people, and he ended up dying of that. I think it was leprosy, that disease on that island because of his commitment to those people. Mother Teresa going into the streets of Calcutta and living among those that had nothing. And, it humbles me, and God's not going to compare me on that day, but I'm going to compare myself. It's like, what did I do in relationship to my walk and my gifts and my callings and my blessings versus what these people did with what God gave to them? And so it's humbling and sobering to think about those things like that. Like that chaplain, if he ever comes up for parole, it would be, I'm not saying he will, but wouldn't it be remarkable? He says, no, I choose to stay, or I will be here every day. Even though I can freely come and go, I am going to be back regularly because, now I've got this connection and this heartbeat for these people, right?
It's to that point, there's the field chaplain in particular. I'd ask him, a number of times, so what happens when you leave? He's like, I want to go where the Lord sends me.
Yeah.
And he seems pretty sincere in that. I was like, okay. And then I talked to him not long ago. I was like, okay, what's parole look like? He goes, well, I think he said set off. There's the lingo, right? So he'd come up for parole, and I think it's another year or two before he's back. Now, at that particular unit, JJ, he had shared that when he got there, a couple of years ago, there was maybe one service a month, some outside organization coming in. I think there's now 13. In the last 2 years at that unit, more than 220 guys have been baptized in Jesus' name. Now, men come in and out. There's less than 600 inmates there.
Wow.
So it's super powerful. And when he said that when the parole got pushed back, he's like, he goes, I'm okay with it. And I'm paraphrasing, but pretty much what he says, I'm okay with it because I don't think God's done with what he has me doing here. Like, oh my goodness. Like, JJ, I'm a believer. If I got put in prison, right, if I did something to get in and I'm still trying to follow God, I don't know that I could say that, right? Like, because I'm a visitor. I can say, David, I feel blessed to go there twice, but I leave each day.
Right.
JJ does not.
Right.
And to think that must be, I appreciated, he ministered. That's one of the unique things of God's economy. It's backwards, right? I go there to serve and I get served.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, I think of Paul and, going before Agrippa, going before leaders in Pennsylvania, and then ended up in a prison by himself with just a handful of people that came to see him, and I wish you were as I am, save these chains, right?
Right.
And so he was even like, I'd rather not be a prisoner. But then, he again, in God's economy, he flipped it on its head. I am a prisoner of Christ.
Right.
Rome has me bound, but I am bound by Christ, by what he called me to do and this mission with which he has set me on, and to embrace it in that way. And, humbling myself to the point that I have wrestled with some shortcomings and deficiencies and things in my life. And, I'm in a very constrained situation right now with my oldest son. I hate to go, don't want to be too personal here. Okay. But, we're in the process of trying to get him services and eventually a place to go. And so we have to go through this process. And I started it in September. I got my first meeting in January. I had a follow-up to that, did a couple of others. We did a financial assessment thing here about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And then they came back and said, okay, we need to do an intake session with one of our psychiatrists to assess what he's qualified. It will be a year to 2 years before that assessment can be scheduled. And so we are, and I'm like, I paid for an assessment in November. I've got letters from psychiatrists, and why are we doing this? And so I got very, very upset about it. And I still need to at least respond to that email. I drafted one, and I thought, okay, I'm going to sit on this, and I'm glad I did, because it would not have been a contributing to the good of the situation kind of thing. But in that, God's talking to me, And I mentioned on one of my recent podcasts, I talked about surrender. When I surrender something to God, I don't get to tell him what to do with it.
Right.
And he reminded me that, David, you are surrendered to me, and your life is mine, and I will do with it as I will, when I will, how I will. And I don't know if I'm fully there yet. I'm at more peace about it than I was in that moment. And I'm resting in, I turned 60 in January. I've got this, I am headed to the final stage of this walk on earth. And I am at peace about, if nothing else works out in this world, I'm okay with that, because there's an eternity before me that's going to more than make up for anything that I've got if I remain faithful and I walk with him. And so I think a prisoner gets that insight maybe in a way that I don't. I'm a prisoner of circumstance. They are physically reminded every day. They don't get to decide where they go. They don't get to decide what time they get up, what time they go to bed, what they eat, when they go to the bathroom. They have no agency.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you certainly share that with them. And I think that's part of our lifelong journey, right? As a believer, as a disciple.
How much control do we really have?
Right, can we
ultimately?
surrender? Yeah.
Right.
And,
I mean, honestly, if again, we try to be the regular individualist Western mindset, we can achieve anything. And there's some truth to that. But honestly, how much real agency and control do I have over my life? I could make the best investments in the world and have everything set up for retirement, and that could be wiped out in a night, in a day. My cars could blow up tomorrow. I could be in a total, my health could be broken in one visit to the doctor. Right. We are walking such a thin line of this veil of control that we think that we have. And then you get down to it, I can control my reactions to what happens to me. And I don't do that well. And then I have agency in some of the choices I make. But a lot of those outcomes and consequences of those choices, I'm promised things, if I do them God's way, that he will reward and bless, and it will be okay. But how much do I really control?
I think that is our lifelong learning, right? That can I get to the place where, not that I believe God will make this situation okay, mm-hmm. because some situations aren't okay.
Right.
Right. They're just bad.
Yeah.
But I will be okay in the sense that, like you said, at the end, it will be okay. Right. I might not actually get delivered from this storm.
Yeah.
Right. And so your experience really, I would say, some of the exact same things, and we probably all do, mm-hmm. that the inmates do. Right. I'm going to have some boundaries that are not of my initial choosing. Right. When we have kids and you have a child that's born with a situation that's beyond your control.
Right.
You wanted to have children, right? We want children, but we didn't think that this
was not in the cards.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a different level of constraint. And, tied to what we're doing, the things we become passionate about in our service, Brother Shaw, and probably most pastors would say, something like our ministry opportunities look a lot like what's necessary, right? What's available to
what's
be done.
In front of us. Yeah.
And, when you, as your work with your family, to do your best job to take care of your family, that really is number one. And that's a lot of work, right? In your case is very unique, and you will deal with some challenges that I can't fully understand because I'm not in your shoes. And I can imagine the challenge. And again, these men doing some of the same things, and probably true in both cases, whether it's people who want to go, hey, I should be involved. Jesus was concerned about, I'll say, the marginalized, use terms we use today,
right.
whether it's incarceration, homelessness, what have you. But Jesus also cares about Jonathan.
Yeah.
Right? Anyone with some special need that really does require extra attention. People can be involved in these things in probably far more ways than they understand, mm-hmm. right? Just like with prison ministry, there's a fear of, I go in, could I be attacked? And for anyone who's never been, in the case of the group that I've been working with, Steve Miller's been doing it for 30 years, never had a problem, not in 30 years. So there's a lot, but even knowing that, I still hesitated for a long time. But there are ways to help on the outside. Maybe you're an employer and you do second chance, or you can consider it, or you could be a big brother, like a mentor to some of the men. Or if for ladies that are listening, a lady could be a mentor, a big sister. Maybe someone who teaches a Bible study. Or if you're at a season of life, because there'll be folks that are either retired in terms of the season of life, or maybe their job is exceptionally flexible. Maybe they're just someone who picks a man or a woman up, if it's, appropriate genders, when they get out of prison, to take them to the halfway house, just so they're not, because sometimes these guys actually in some of the jails, they might get released at night.
Wow.
Like the bus is not going, or most prisons are really out in the middle of some field, hours intentionally so,
Right.
but even local jails or county jails. So there's a lot of ways to get involved. In the same way, if someone says, hey, I don't know that I could provide respite for a family who has either foster kids or a child with autism or Down syndrome or some unique need, probably could pray for them. Some people are like me. I'm a good cheerleader. I don't have the patience to do it, but maybe it's someone who helps bring awareness to the need and helps a local congregation rally around those families.
Yeah.
Right? One person's praying. Someone says, hey, I know you guys need a date night. Here's my gift card is for the sitter who has that. There's probably ways we can be involved in various ministries that we just haven't thought of that really do further the kingdom. And I'll say within our natural, not so much our comfort zone, but within our natural giftings that God's given us, right? Again, I know mine's not, you wouldn't leave me with kids with special needs. I don't have the patience, but I could help bring awareness, or there's some things I can do. And so I think for any of us, as we see some interesting ministry opportunity come up, say, within my giftings, how could I, we can be curious, and how could I be involved? Because it is, and I think this is probably true of any ministry of this nature, you are going into a situation where you do not get something back, right? Someone who says, I have the temperament to, sitting is not the right word, but if somewhere hang out with Jonathan one night, so you and your wife go on, you and Tanya go on a date, there's people who, that's their temperament, and it probably brings them joy, right? Like they're really gifted. So look for those ways to use our giftings to support these ministries, because it will change your life. Because the person who does that, they're not necessarily getting something back from John. They might get joy,
right?
But it's not like they're selling him a product or a service. When I go to, you go to a prison ministry, whether you're doing a service, like a normal church service, or you're teaching a class, I don't get to charge those guys. Right. But I often feel like I have received infinitely, significantly more than I put in.
Yeah, I was just thinking of, asking you that, whatever you can, feel free to share, one of those moments, because like I said, you were just starting this journey. So it's been over a year since about a year since you were here. And I could tell it had moved you. So that moment that this is worth it. I don't know if you could pick one or several or something like that. At what point did it just become, I get it now. I see what Jesus meant, right?
It's usually the first time. Goodness. There's so many examples. I'm trying to think of just when the guys are, you have an idea in your mind, what is the prison going to be like, right?
Right.
My first event was in a MAC, they call MAC security, and it's tied up to the amount of barbed wire and gates and guard towers. And, it's sobering. They're built in the 50s. They look terrible. It's frightening. So, I guess intentionally so. You go in, through a lot of razor wire and guard towers. You get in, you go through metal detectors, get patted down. As you go inside to the chapel in the inner part of the unit, there's this giant, the more violent the prison, the bigger the sign that says no hostages beyond this point, which is sobering. But you go in, and then, like I said, this case was a marriage seminar, and there are men who are never getting out of their life without the possibility of parole, and their wives showed up. Now, pretty interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
And some of them are pretty, they're in for very violent, horrible crimes. And then you get a chance to mix with men, in this case, and their families who, from horrible things with kids to murder, everything in between, and you'll watch, that the Lord is working in their lives. And they'll be genuinely grateful because we're from the outside. Many of these men now, that was a marriage somewhere they see their spouse, but there are men who see no family, and they'll be so genuinely grateful. And some of the things that were so impactful was there was those moments. And for me, this part has been helpful, is there are times, lots of times, that I think I'm better than other people. Okay. In full transparency, usually when I'm driving on the highway.
Oh, yeah. Well, everybody is an above average driver in their heads, but statistically that's impossible. Right.
But I'm reminded, one of the things that benefits me, I think probably anyone, is when I go, I know that I'm not better than them. In the eyes of the law, yes, I am in the free world, but not in the eyes of God, right? My sins and the worst, when I can look up their record, my sins and their sins are equal before the Lord. That helps keep me humble.
Yeah.
And if I can be thoughtful in those moments, and if it remind the guys that they're not worse than me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Flip it on its head there. So has this changed how you approach life at home, life outside those moments?
It certainly softens some of my views, right? Yep. Gives me a sense of humility. And you'd ask, so yes, it does. It does change things. And part of it is just now that I get to engage in some of the units, get to participate in classes. So any of these things where I get together with other men, if we're teaching about something, it helps remind me to try to apply it. Right. So I can't say we're image creatures of God and they get angry at someone on the highway. The truth is they probably were distracted like I was. It's not that they're actually a defective person, right? But they're probably not really defective. Okay. They're probably just distracted, right? So those things help. And then specifically to your question, there are times I'll watch God in, where the units where I can go back, watch hardness start to break.
Okay.
In this one unit in San Saba, there's a guy usually sits in the back. I say hold court, right? He gets out of the cage. I don't fault any man for doing anything to get out of that cage.
Right.
Be in the back, usually with a group of guys, and they usually are talking, not terribly disruptive, but over the months, I watched him still be at that group and talk less during the service, right? Participate, be aware more.
Right.
And he did get baptized. And because I talked to him before he got baptized, and he just talked about this is the next step. If you're really going to be following Jesus, this is important. And he did get baptized, but I've watched and I talked to him and I asked about things like how are your kids, and I talk and tell it was a real sensitive topic, but I could start to see some emotion come. But a guy that's hard, you touch his shoulder, he's like steel. Right. His grip is like a vice grip. And he had a sense of humility, but also hardness. But I watched that shell break. And then over time, we would talk and he would share things. And I'd see him come up to pray. And again, a guy that's hard, right? And then watch him come up to pray. And then watch him ask him to, sometimes I like to get the guys reading scripture, being involved. I love the give and take and community, crowd involvement.
Right.
So if I have to lead a service, I usually ask guys to read some of the scripture, do different things. And one night I said, hey, if I ask you to read, would you read? Because I don't want to embarrass a guy.
Right. Can they read?
Yeah, I do. That's one of the things, right? I totally worry about, is someone going to struggle with that or just be embarrassed? And he's like, well, I'm not worthy. And he wasn't saying it sarcastically.
Wow. I am not fit to read the word. Wow. Which of us is?
Right.
Yeah, and that's, AI is going to try to take this pause out. It will be put back in.
Yeah, those moments are so powerful. And I had to tell him, I was like, none of us are. None of us are. And it was revealing, right? Like, so those moments where a hard man. And then one night, same guy, we're walking out after a service. And I would tell him, I said, man, I'm so glad you talked to me. And he's like, I'm glad you talked to me. I was like, no, I want you to understand. Like, you don't have a choice to be on this campus. I understand. I said, but you have a choice to be in this service.
And to participate.
Yeah. I said, no, you don't even have to talk to me. I said, you know, I'm not tough enough to make you talk to me. I said, so I can talk to you and you could choose not to respond. I said, but you do. Mm-hmm. I said, thank you. And so walking out after one of the services, I would ask him, what were your hobbies in the free world, as they say? And he told me, he's like, basically working out in women. But he was not bragging. He was ashamed. How many times? Think about this. How many conversations have we had within our, we say in the church, we mean the building we gather in.
Right.
I don't think it's very rare that we would have a conversation with a brother and say, what did you do in the past? And they tell you so regretfully. Now, I'm sure it happens sometimes, but there's been these moments where I knew it was so revealing, right? Like, he was not bragging. He was not proud. And I'm sure that men and women who might listen to this, if they're leaders, or they're pastors or preachers or, some sort of leadership role, they probably had similar experience where someone's confessing. So for someone who that's not my primary role, when you say, how is this life changing? When these guys share that with you, it's deep, right? Like, it's so, they're giving you so much trust, because men, we don't share anyway.
Right.
But in a place where transparency would be seen as weakness, where regret would be seen as weakness, and this guy is not in one of the faith-based storms. He's in a regular dorm. So it's just so interesting. So those moments that I've matured enough in life to know, oh, this guy has given me, he's really being so transparent. He is inviting me into his world. And this part I'll share, the thing that has been so rewarding with that, JJ's like, Brian, he hardly talks to anyone, but he talks to you. And look, maybe it's because I'm little and I'm not a threat. But, those moments you go, okay, God has allowed me, and other inmates will connect with other people. So it's just how God will use us. If we're there, he'll use us, and in a way that connects. And the last time, he and I talked before we went out, he shared those things with me. I tried to tell him, I said, you know what, as your discipleship grows, I said, this is going to be hard. Maybe you won't believe this, but there is something unique for you to do that only you can do for God. I said, that is true of all of us, but you will have something in your life and you're going to think it was a terrible thing you did. Probably the worst thing you've ever done. That might be your inroads to serving another man, because as you overcome, right, your testimony is like, there will be things only you can do, people only you can reach that I would never reach. But because of your experience in your life, and when you as your discipleship grows, as you really grow in the Lord, and I said, there will be things only you can do.
Yeah. Well, again,
and he couldn't even, that was so, I could tell it was not like he thought I was lying, but that would be so foreign that there'd be something that he could do.
Yeah. Well, I think of Paul, right? I mean, to be able to stand before the high priests and also these foreign controllers and rulers and say, I used to condemn this way. I used to be one of the people that was putting these people to death. I encountered this man that they claimed was God, and I know that he is God. And here is the result of that. How much weight did he bring to Caiaphas and the high priests and that council? When I was a Pharisee, I lived among the strictest of the sects of the Pharisees. I was one of you, and I know what I'm doing, right? This is not some fly-by-night thing. This is not something I just decided to do one day. I have been transformed by this, in so many words, right? And so those people walked away had to be thinking in the back of their mind, there's got to be something there, right? This guy was not some flighty, on the fringes Pharisee. He was on his way to take care of some people on Damascus, right? And he disappeared from us And here he is back proclaiming that he has spent literal time in the presence of this one called Jesus, who's instructed him in Egypt and given him these insights into our law and our books as to why he was the one that fulfilled them. Wow. Yeah. So
yeah, there are those there, and there are others. In some of the circumstances where we have a chance to teach classes, there's units where the men want discipleship. So for people who go, well, I'm not a preacher, but I love to teach. I feel I have a heart for discipleship. There's so many opportunities. But in one where I get to go and spend more time at the Bartlett unit, there's a man, he's been in prison since he was 16. He killed his mother.
Wow.
He shared an article with me that when he was in another unit that I think Houston Chronicle wrote up on him. So he gave me the article. And he had grown up in an abusive home. And as he told the story to the reporter and she reported it, when he was 16, he had got a new girlfriend. Mom was very unhappy with it. And he tells the story as the mom came after him with a knife. He picks up a shotgun. He shoots his mother. He takes her life. He burns the house down around her. The police find the body, find the shotgun. They find no knife. Right. So his story can't be corroborated. So since he was a very young man, he's been in prison. He now has a bachelor's degree in theology. He's a field minister, but he's also at a place of struggle because some things have happened in that unit. There's some conflict. Bartlett's a pretty awesome unit. It's called an innovation unit. They're doing a lot of programs, really working to really help transform these men. And he's been leading a dorm, but he had shared with me, I don't think anyone there will be listening to this. I don't know. They get access, but not a lot of access to the outside world. And he was sharing just this challenge. He goes, I know God's forgiven me. He goes, but right now I just have all these nightmares. Right. And he goes, because his mom's life, not long after, I guess a number of years ago, his father took his own life. So he, feels that he obviously knows his responsibility with his mother. He feels responsible for his father. They've had some things in the unit not work like they wanted. He's feeling this weight and just that the struggle of that. And when he's sharing this, you can tell it's sincere, right? Like, and that's a struggle that I can't relate to. And when we were talking, it's like, Brian, you know how many people have done what I've done in this world? Like, not very many. Right. Like, there's not that many people who say, I shot my mom. They're trying to work through this. So it's, it's like, I was like, I don't have words. So like, we'll pray, right? We'll pray and we'll be together. That's it. Because there's not words to undo that. It's just like anything else, we have to mature in our faith and go through the process of, the forgiveness or struggling through whatever challenge comes up. What's been beautiful is in that they're starting another cohort where they're mentoring guys. And he was thinking about changing dorms because there's just some conflict, not physical, but, emotional conflict. Yeah. And yet he stayed to work through it. And so I got to see them on Friday as a team discussing their issues. So they were gathered as a team of leaders in a prison, working through their issues the way most of us ought to, but often don't on teams. So it was just this beautiful thing where you get to sometimes see discipleship from a different angle. And it has been very rewarding. And I think part of it just, God's found a place that I can use some of my giftings, and also just because I was available. That's the other thing that I've learned in prison ministry, because I've watched some of the people. I'll say, maybe they're not polished. Neither. I'm an acquired taste too, brother, like unsweet tea, very much an acquired taste. And you can see that God will just use whoever's available. So that's the other thing for someone who might listen to this and think I have no talents. Trust me, if I can go and make friends, anyone can. Anyone can.
What about, and we were discussing at breakfast this morning with a group of men, that tying in this idea of being able to be bored, being able to be just in the moment without the distractions that all of the social media and the technology that we have today have, and how that's a lost art. And it's also, I think, a detriment to humanity and society, because one of the ways the body regulates anxieties is in those moments of doing absolutely nothing. Yeah. One thing I think that I know is absolutely lost is that I want to come with the answers. I want to come with the solution. I want to come. Can I just sit with somebody and just be? Because sometimes there are no answers.
I'd like to think I've matured. I'm 51, probably spiritually and emotionally 30. That might be overly generous, brother. I might be being too generous with myself. But I have learned, and maybe it's my temperament or the way I want people to be with me, which is direct, that when you're candid with these guys, it's far more impactful. And sometimes life is rough, even for a believer, right? It's just, we can go through times that aren't okay. They're just terrible. And I have found, especially in that prison setting, to be candid, right? Just like, if this is going to be terrible, it's terrible. I got no words, man. We're just going to pray. And if you're here tomorrow, we'll do it again, and we'll pray. And if there's things we can do, we'll try to do them. But just being willing to be transparent, to be candid, because when things are going to be rough, they're just going to be rough, and not pretend. And they've generally appreciated and responded well. On Thursday night, there's a class called Malachi Dads. It's 2 books, one Heart of a Man and then a Heart of a Father. And afterwards, talking to the guys, they're like, hey, thanks for just being so truthful. I was like, well, probably shouldn't lie to inmates. You guys probably have a pretty good truth detector. Right?
Yeah, they probably, the BS detectors on those guys is probably off the charts.
Not going to con the confidence men, but they appreciated transparency and candor. And again, you'll see the guys that are sincere in their faith, or versus just trying to get out. And look, I don't fault. If I'm been locked up and you tell me to take 10 classes to get parole, I'm going to take the classes, because who wants to be in a cage? At the same time, I will tell them, if you're serious about the Jesus stuff, I'm just, you're serious. Like, you can leave prison and be an atheist and never come back. This is true. It is better with the Lord. But I said, a number of times, especially at Bartlett, because it's close to where we are, I'd say, if you're serious about serving the Lord, I said, I'll always remind them I'm good at being redundant and repetitive. I told them, you need to have a congregation before you leave.
Yeah.
You need to have a small group plan before you leave, because that's where discipleship and one-on-one can happen. You need someone who cares enough about you to say you're off track and let you be angry. And I said, if you don't have a body of believers you're part of, and you get released around here, come to my congregation. You can be part of the men's group that I'm part of. Come to a small group I'm part of. And one of the guys goes, for real? I'm like, I'm not lying to you guys. Just remember, not lying. And I told him where New Life Austin is. It's on Mopac between, Wells Branch and Palmer. Come back, another week. He's like, hey, your church really is there. And I was like, did you think I was like one of those women at the club that gave you the fake number? Like, you looked up on Google Earth and there's just a field. Right? There's no building, just a field. I was like, no, it's really there. He goes, we live behind that. We live back off Wells Branch. I was like, you're very welcome to come. He's like, are you sure? I was like, yes. Again, not lying to you. And he goes, what's your church like? And I was like, oh, I know what he means. Do they look like me? And so in this unit, there's about 50 guys, the colors of the rainbow. Yeah. So I said, hey, when you look around here, it's just like this. And we let women in too. So, his fiance he actually gets released this coming week.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to Caesar and his fiance coming. He goes, well, I might be on an ankle monitor. I said, look, if you're on a monitor and you can't leave, I said, here's a church card. You can connect with me through the church.
Right.
We'll come to your house and teach a Bible study just so your fiance can get connected. I don't care about the ankle monitor.
Yeah.
If you can't leave, that's cool. But he didn't ask, Brother Ross, he didn't say, so what's your view on the Godhead? How do you baptize? Are you Catholic or what? He didn't ask anything. So, and again, it's not that I'm that special. It's just, I was there.
Let me ask you this. And it was kind of headed in that direction with some of the stuff you've been saying. The idea that you are now being granted these opportunities because you have chosen to become consistent with your attendance. Do you think you would have those had you been hit or miss once every 2 or 3 months? There's got to be some buy-in on your part, I think, to get to that point.
Yeah, so the consistency, I think, and I would say, if someone who wants to volunteer, do it however you can. Right? So, for instance, a person could say, you know what, I could do that once a year. Well, there are marriage events, there are services, there's like Day with Dads, Day with Moms. There's a lot of events. And if someone can only volunteer once a year, it'll still change your life.
Okay.
Right? I mean, that's so valuable. I don't want to discount that. But to your broader point, yes, I had watched, I'm very intentional in the places and the consistency, because in my mind, I know I'm not a preacher or a pastor. That's not my calling. But at the same time, Jesus said, go and make disciples. You do have to be converted before you can become a disciple. But conversion itself is just the first step, right? And I knew for my own life, it's small group setting, right? One-on-one or one-on-few. And the way to do that is relationship and overtime. So I was like, okay, can I find a place I can go over and over to build that relationship, to decipher, right? And determine, is that person sincere? Now, am I a pro at it? No, some of these guys could still be working me. I recognize I'm a novice, but the consistency, many of these men will say they have no one comes to visit. Like, there's another guy that should be getting out. Two guys are getting out like in the next week or two. I fully expect to see them at New Life. Now, one of them will live in Temple. He's like, but I got a motorcycle. I can be there. I was like, you're welcome. I said, now, so someone from New Life watches this. You see one of my friends. I'm introducing them as a friend from a small group. I said, you can take the rest of that. But
I'm not going to open you up for
I don't
those
want
questions.
Yeah, in a small group, and this is all true. And TC, the one I expect from Temple, I had, the classes are like Thursday. I have a Friday class and a Thursday night. So on one of the Thursday nights, I just I'm in town. I should be there. Well, it happened to be New Year's Day. It's a prison. I figured one day is a day. They go, when I showed up, they're like, oh, there's no class. I was like, well, cool. I can leave. You can have your time back. We could have class, or we can just hang out. And they're like, no, let's have class. Well, TC was there. I don't even know if I talked to him that night, because it's a group,
right?
Like 50 guys. Probably a full month later, it was a number of Thursday nights later, he comes back up. And he's like, hey, I just want to say thanks for coming on the holiday, because he didn't have any family come. And it was just, like I said, I don't even know if I spoke to him on the holiday.
But he saw you. I have a family member, my father-in-law, who's in a nursing home, and that is another form of a prison. I don't want to demean that environment, those community, those people, but he's a prisoner of his body, and he's also he outside of a few appointments, he never leaves that facility, often other than down the hall for some physical therapy, and then the meals, and he's in his room, and he doesn't get enough visits from me, let alone anybody else. I mean, my mother-in-law's there almost every day, and then I need to be there more. And I think, well, it doesn't matter. And when he's not long. He's in the last stages of Parkinson's. He's one cold away from not being able to breathe. His lung capacity. So what is it? I guess it's hard. It's hard to go see somebody in those circumstances, and we make it about us and how uncomfortable I am.
Right.
And we don't take that step back and say, what does this do for them?
Yeah. No, the guys love it. And I think that nursing homes, we don't call them orphanages, but group homes, right?
Right.
Any of these places, it's always sobering when I walk out of a prison. So sobering. And I'm walking out.
Yeah.
And these guys are there. Now, again, I very rarely will have a guy act like he hasn't owned it. The ones that they'll totally own their mistakes. You can see the repentance. But and many of these guys will vocalize what probably most of them think. They'll say, hey, we know that you're a volunteer. So you're paying to be here. Right? They'll do the math, sort of that mental math of you could be with and they'll say, every now and then a guy will say, hey, I'll mention wife and kids. I'll say, thank your wife and kids that you're here.
Yeah.
They know you'd be elsewhere.
Just this thought came, the burden, the weight, the joy, the ministry that your family does carry in that. It happens in every ministry, from the pastor to the lay preacher to the whatever, right? The family does carry part of that, right? They don't get full access to you because you do have these nights that you're not around the house. Do we really appreciate that? Do I appreciate that in my wife and my son? And do I appreciate that in the families of the others I see doing this?
And it is great when those guys acknowledge that, right? It's super cool because they really, any of us as volunteers have just that unique opportunity to touch them. Mm-hmm. Many of them they'll realize that, or others will mention, they'll bring that to their realization that, oh yeah, I'm a volunteer. I'm not paid. I'm not part of the paid staff. And I will say on the side of us as volunteers, we do need to be intentional with our families, right? That we're planning other times so that we're not. And I had the chaplain there tell me, Brian, don't overdo this and sacrifice your family, right? Like you need to care for them first. Like good advice. So this is all scheduled and planned. And then Courtney came to the marriage seminar at Bartlett. That was there. It's probably been a month or so ago now. Uh-huh. And so I'd been a good enough husband last year. My Christmas present was her going through the TDCJ training. And I should get that to you. Maybe you can put it in the show notes. Because one thing that, if you ever think I might volunteer, sometimes you can get in like
decide to.
Yeah. And there might be ways to get in like on a periodic basis but if you want to be prepared to go kind of wherever the opportunity is, you can go through the TDCJ training. Takes about 45 minutes online, but it can take a couple months sometimes to get the approval back. But Courtney did that. I got that for Christmas, right? Okay. So she said, I'll go to a marriage seminar or a special event at some point. And it totally impacted her.
Okay.
There were 25 couples. Some of these people probably never, this is maybe not surprising to some of these people got married in prison.
Yeah.
They'd never spent 8 hours with their spouse before. A number of them had never, we had a service at the end of this Saturday event. Some of them had never been in a church service
together.
In court, and he's like, well, like I'm like a menopausal woman, so I'm going to cry all the time.
I have shed plenty of tears.
But the emotion was strong on her too. She's like, I don't know if I can go back because it's so emotional. Like, no, these couples need to see that.
Yeah.
One of the guys. Now, I think all these are super impactful, but because I get to go back to Bartlett, where a lot of times we'll have a seminar, say we did a family day at Ferguson. Well, we're not back there, the next couple of weeks. I think some of the group was there for a Sunday service, but we're not there all the time. So I get to get feedback at a level that we don't typically get. One of the guys had come to the Lord in prison. Okay, not a believer before, which not a life crisis, right? That usually none of us. I like to say this to my friends, like how many people have come to the Lord right after their salary got doubled, their marriage is going great, they got some stock options worth life-changing money, and they're like, today is the day I'm giving my life to Jesus. I think it's going well. I want to thank Him.
Right.
Usually it's the exact opposite, right? So we shouldn't be real upset when someone comes to the Lord in prison. But right. So this gentleman had come to the Lord in prison. His wife is an atheist. He said after that event, she started asking questions about God because it went so well. Yeah. And it was, so, and I even mentioned one of the guys like, oh, my wife, I said, I want her to come back. She was concerned because of her emotion. Like, no, we need to see that because they need to see people react to them like people.
They're people.
Yeah, like, and one of the things I share with him, David, is when we have a service, I'll ask, I'm like, hey, God hasn't given me the ability to read your driver's license numbers, not how this works. I said, so how many are, you're already a believer, you've been baptized in Jesus' name, filled with the Holy Spirit. And a number of guys will raise their hand. I'll say, okay, so today for this moment, like when Scripture says there's neither Jew nor Greek or free nor bond, we're just some guys that are going to sing some praise songs. We're going to study Scripture. We're going to pray together. So for a moment, and then the rest of you aren't there yet. You can become like us.
How much different should walking into church Sunday morning look? if we were to, and I've said this on a recent podcast, it's resonating here. I have spit in the face of the Creator who designed me and who died for me. And I have trod on his grace all too much. I have presumed on his grace far too much in my walk. And to realize that, God, we talk about he's good, he's love, he's light, he's all of those things. But first and foremost, God is holy. And I have absolutely no right to enter into his presence. And he made a way for me to do that. How can I not come in just overflowing with gratitude and joy? And in my prayer the other morning, I typically go up to our church building. We're in the process of being kicked out. The landlord's died, and they're trying to sell it. So, how much longer I'll have access to something like that? But to know he visited me, I felt his presence, and the tears flowed. This sovereign, holy, righteous God chose to peel the veil back a little bit and let me feel his presence. He does not have to. He chooses to. And to know that while you're sitting there with those men, that he chooses to do it there.
It's one of the other things that's really lovely is in San Sabbath, JJ does a good job leading the service, leading music. He's again the field chaplain and inmate, and there will be songs where they used just CDs, right? And there's not a choir, but they'll have a couple that are tracks, and they'll pull down just do a track, and it'll just be the guys singing, just a bunch of men, and they're terrible, which is awesome. Like, it's not, now some of the guys do sing well, but the beauty, like, there's just the men singing. Like, that's just powerful in itself.
Yeah.
And imagine if you and I, the next time someone comes up to pray with us, we just tell them what we're praying for. Hey, I'm off track. I need my language or my thoughts, or I need to be a better husband or a better father or a better employee. Like,
honestly, recently, my language has been, I've been slipping here, Lord, and I had that conversation. I don't want to tread on your grace.
And if we just tell our brothers what we're praying for, like these guys do, we can be that catalyst. Because I'm like, what can I take away and apply? Because it's just their nature to come up. Because we'll ask, what are you praying for? Or they'll tell. Many times they just tell us.
Yeah.
And like, okay, I can apply that back when I'm with the other guys. I can take that transparency and do the same thing.
Yeah.
And part of it maybe is I appreciate being with people. We've all done something, and there's not a pretense of perfection. And I do think that is one of the things that's helped me is now that I've been around the sun a few times, it can be easy for someone, even if you came to the Lord as an adult and had a really rough life, and that's BC, before Christ. No matter when we came, unless someone is unique, and it's just not true, we've all messed up since coming to the Lord. And for me, being willing to be transparent when the time is appropriate in my failures has helped me connect with the guys, but also helped me connect with others, not just in prison, but within our own congregation, because you can look out there and see someone who's either older or they're dressed nice and forget that if they've been living for the Lord for a significant amount of time, since coming to God, since being baptized in Jesus' name and filled with the Holy Spirit, my greatest transgressions were since then, not before, because I was younger, right? As a married man, as a father, my greatest failures. Sometimes being in these, for me, this is just me, in these volunteer situations has enabled me to think, oh yeah, if I can admit it to these guys, one, it's good for me, right? We confess, James said we confess, I'm paraphrasing, confess our sins to God to be forgiven. And I talk to you about them to be made whole, to heal.
Yes.
And so at the right place and the right time, I found to be very helpful for me, but helpful for them, because they're like, oh, if we're talking about being a good dad or a good father, I'm just telling them the things I did wrong.
Oh.
Or, even the prayers I have today, right? Or, 1 minute I'm like, be good to your wife. And then I have a blow up. I'm like, look, I talk to the guys about everything. Like, I probably will go home and set my face on fire tonight. So I don't have this down. I am trying just like you. I'll say, that's why I say, if you get out and you're near us, come be part, because I need you to struggle with me as much as you need me on the days you're struggling.
Yeah.
And so that, like I said, there'll be, I think some men are probably naturally better at that, but that is something that I've learned along the way. Learn to share my testimony. Not the one from 100 years ago.
No.
The one that's more recent.
That doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have to choose that carefully. And those men seem to take you into their confidence, and they know how to hold a confidence. That's
Well, and they can't tell a lot of people. They're locked down pretty, literally, technologically locked down.
But a lot of them too also is the fact that that culture they came out of, the gang, snitches get stitches, right?
Yeah.
You don't. If somebody shares something with you, that is considered a sacred trust. And so I think you probably have more confidence, even if they do get out, that your stories you tell them will never go to anybody else. Can we become as safe for other people as a prisoner would be with what I trust them with?
I mean, the things guys have shared, like their struggles, I really do try to take time and say thank you. Like, thanks for sharing that. I don't take it lightly. Like in my friend with the vice grip, like, look, I can talk to you. You can choose not to talk to me. When you share with me, I value it because I know men don't share to begin with. And in a prison, in this community, this is the last place to be transparent, the last place to shed a tear, the last place to say, I have to be weak.
Yeah.
Because strength is valued, because there will be really rough prisons. One of the books we're going through talks about Angola in Louisiana before years ago. And it probably still is a rough place, but at the time of the writing of the book, the story they told, I think there were, maybe 5,000 inmates there. Like a third of them had life without potential for parole. So nothing to lose.
They're not getting out anyway.
Yeah, horribly violent, but the Lord was working in there, and it's through a few converts, there's more. And the story talked about, a giant man who's exceptionally violent, like a murderer, a killer, not like a bad dude, came to the Lord, but his conversion impacted many others. And it's safer now, but you have men of that caliber, and you can connect with them, and they're people, did some bad things. But again, that part that comes back to me every time is, okay, Brian, you're not better. And for the guy who's either been converted, it's a reminder to him that he's not worse. And the guy who's struggling to think, can I be forgiven? Because I'm so bad.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I have had conversations with you at breakfast over the last year. I've seen this total transformation in your life. So let me just, we've been at this a while. We need to bring this in. I'm going to have you back to continue this conversation. This has been so rich. But thinking about somebody's listening to this, and you've already kind of given the one thing, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, TDCJ.
Yeah, there's all the fun initials.
All the acronyms that are out there. So there's that one that's available. And you dropped it along the way, but let's just kind of summarize. So if somebody's heard this, and it may not be prison, it could be nursing home. And I've been into nursing homes and led the services where it was just me and the people, the volunteers, and the room wasn't available, and you end up all those fun things. I've been into
they make for great stories.
Yeah, I've been into prisons a few times and stuff like that. So, but if somebody really wanted to test the waters, so to speak, I think probably the TDCJ,
Texas Department of Criminal Justice. It took me like 2 years to figure it out.
Yeah, TDCJ, yeah. So probably they would need to be intentional, right? Okay, so this might be something I want to do. So obviously that would be one thing, to go ahead and get the clearance, so that when and if those opportunities come up, again, you get passionate about it. You're thinking, I need to do this. And then now you got to wait 6 weeks. Okay, well, how about get that out of the way first, so that when the time comes, you can go in. What else? I mean, I know there's needs for people coming in, people coming out. Just drop just real quick summary of what are ways people that are interested, if this is something that God has touched them on and they want to start exploring this, where could they start?
Great question. So very generally, any of those ministries where you're going outside the building, nursing home, group homes, jails, prisons, right? Find the person in your congregation who's already doing it and just say, hey, I'd like to go and watch, right? I'm scared to death, or what, use your temperament. But, if you were leading it and I would going to say what I said to Steve, like, I don't know what to do, but I'd like to come.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just like a helper, whatever that means. I'll carry stuff in, go and just watch, right? Because a lot of times it might just be, they need someone to pray with someone. And if you go, I struggle with it, just go, but be transparent. Like, hey, this is my level of comfort. You know, start praying about the opportunity, meet the people in your congregation doing the thing, and just be willing to go and watch, right? Because you don't think, oh, I'm not the preacher. Do I have to lead? Nope, just go and watch and, you know, carry the stuff in or whatever it may be, because the Lord will open up opportunities from there. Now, beyond that, like I said, there's mentoring opportunities, Bible study teaching, simple things like, again, someone could be in a place in life where they're retired and they would just take someone to and from work because they get up early naturally and don't want a guy that's in a halfway house spending 2 hours on a bus. So there's so many ways to be involved. So connect with the person in your congregation, you know, your pastor. Hey, I've been thinking about this. Who leads nursing home ministry, or who's leading the prison ministry? And maybe your congregation doesn't have that person. Your pastor will know someone who's doing it. And in Texas, the Reaching Out in Love prison ministry, it's not an official 501c3, but there's a Facebook page, not a website yet, working on that. But probably every congregation, the pastor will have a connection if there's not someone there. So pray, but more importantly, or not more importantly, along with that, don't just pray. Pray and talk to your pastor to find that person, because you can pray for that individual. And again, you might just be able to connect and watch them and go and just observe, because it really will be, it'll be life-changing.
Awesome. Well, with that, we'll drop some notes in there. Brian has a podcast. I think you've actually had some people involved in this on your podcast recently. Some people that were.
We did. We had Charlie Maloff, who's with Texas Cure. He was former law enforcement, became incarcerated. He felt he was wrongfully convicted. He's working on that. Okay. And he works now with Texas Cure, CURE. It's an acronym. I forget what it stands for. But he works with, as you say, justice impacted to help correct wrongs.
Yeah. So you've been talking about it. So his podcast is Just a Thinker. And so we'll have links in the show notes to that, and definitely have Brian back at some point in the future. I have been challenged. I have been enriched. I want to thank you for taking time out on a Saturday morning, and this afternoon and evening you're going to turn around and head back out to do that which you do. And so I honor you in that. I'm humbled by the fact that you do what you do the way you do it. And a step back from that, if you're not able to do this, that's okay too, but you can still pray. I am not in a position to participate in the ministry like you are. My life circumstances are different, and that's just the way it is. And I tend to beat myself up. You know, I should be doing more. I need to be doing that too. No, God, I'm walking in the calling that God has called. The analogy I gave here recently was, you know, if God has called you to be a candle, you don't go climb the first street light that you find and say, I'm gonna change the world, because you're gonna get snuffed out, and even if you stay lit, you're not doing anybody any good, right? If God has called you to be a floodlight, you don't go sit over people's kitchen table, because you're useless to them too, right? So walk in the calling you're in. So you're embracing that. Took you a few years to get there. Like I said, you're in your 50s now. It's never too late. God's not done with us yet. I am fully convinced I've got more coming in the years to come, with the limitations that my life has on it, and we're ready to go. So, Brian, thanks again for coming in. I have enjoyed this. This has been rich, and let's not let it be another 12 months before we do this again.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
And with that, this has been Revving Up with David Ross and my guest, Brian Butka. And all the stuff will be in the show notes. Like, follow, all the stuff you see on the screen right now if you're seeing this on YouTube. And we'll catch you on the next episode.